Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, CEO of SpyderWorks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is David Kasibante, founder and team leader at Space for Tomorrow, an initiative that advocates for the peaceful use of outer space. It puts particular focus on demilitarization of outer space, removal of nuclear sources from outer space, and the management of space debris. Like this video if you enjoy our show, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. David Kasibante, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this conversation today.
So David, just for our listeners and viewers, I'm in Toronto, Canada, and you are coming to us from Kampala, Uganda.
Yes.
So the beauty of that technology makes our world that much smaller. So, when looking at your profile, there is something I had never read before. You are a dance minister and poet.
Yes.
What is a dance minister? I know what a poet is, but what is a dance minister?
Oh, well, yes, as part of my ministry, I dance at my local church, Watoto. I participate in dancing. So because it's we use dance as a means of spreading the gospel, so it then becomes a dance minister. So
Okay.
that's the whole. Yeah. But it's not just the church, but there are also a few other projects that we have participated in. There was a project about street children. We're raising some funds and awareness for street children. We've danced for water. We've danced for many different ways. But yes, dance is one of the things that.
Good. Well, the dancing seems to have worked because I read, you mentioned your church, Watoto, initiated, and I'm going to read this because I want to get it accurate. Initiated as a response to the overwhelming number of orphan children and vulnerable women in Africa, seeks to rescue an individual, raise each one as a leader in their chosen sphere of life, so it will in turn rebuild a nation. And I think currently you have about 4,000 orphaned and vulnerable children in safe haven, if you will. So that's incredible. Yes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that evolved?
Oh, yes, sure. So as part of my local ministry, I'm part of Watoto Church. I was literally born in Watoto Church. My parents served in Watoto Church way before I was born. And Watoto Church is a local church in Uganda that was founded by, interestingly, Canadian missionary. His name was Pastor Gary Skinner, in 1984. So the church is making 40 years next year in Uganda. Wow. So as part of his vision, at the time that he came to Uganda, we had a lot of war happening in the country, and there were so many street children, there were so many kids who had been affected by the war. So God placed onto his heart the vision to rescue those children from the war and everything, and so he set up the Watoto Child Care Ministries in 1993. So since then, the church has rescued children, especially vulnerable children, and also vulnerable women, those who have been either affected by war or calamity, and it has equipped them in this setting. We call them the homes, the Watoto homes, where they're not like orphanages, they're like legitimate homes where they put the children and the ladies, and they equip them to become better. So the idea is rescue, raise, rebuild. Rescue a child, a vulnerable person, raise them, raise a leader, and then rebuild a nation. So that's the vision that the church has to rebuild Uganda from the ravages of war and poverty and that kind of thing. And I'm very proud to share in that vision and to serve within the church as a dance minister, but also as a cell leader and a few other places in which God has managed to place me.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, and I wish you the best in that quest. And now I have to ask an obvious question. How do you move from dance minister and poet and these incredible compassionate undertakings to space? Well,
Well,
how did you get engaged or involved in space?
oh yes, that's a very interesting question. Now, well, the dance thing is more because I am a dancer. I love dance. It's just part of me. It's just in me. In fact, one of the last statements that my mother said to me before she passed on. She passed on when I was 2 years old, in 1999. And the last statement that she said to me is, "I hope you dance." And at the time, I didn't know it was actually a song, but when I grew up, I realized, uh, I thought it was about dancing, and I've always danced since.
Hmm.
However, coming into space, it's because uh, when I was in law school, in my first year of law school, there's this thing called mooting that we have in law school. So mooting is where law students go and engage before a panel of judges on a fictional case. And in my alma mater, Makerere University, we have um, we have an internal moot where students participate. Then, so in that internal moot, my team was one of the best, and we were then allocated another moot, an international moot, which was the Manfred Lux Space Law Moot competition. Now, the Manfred Lux was my introduction to space law. And while I was engaging with the question and engaging with the material, I fell in love with space. I fell in love with what space really stood for. And since then, I have been more or less the most passionate person about space in any room I've
Hmm.
really entered. I then worked with one of my colleagues, and we founded an initiative in 2017 called Space for Tomorrow, which was mostly because when we tried to find mentorship for our space endeavors, we found that there was none. There was no one that we knew within our circles or within the country at all that we could talk to about space. So when we realized that there was that sort of lacuna, my colleague and I decided to start Space for Tomorrow, which was mostly to now put put something ahead of those who may come after us, so that there are no students who come after us who may want to engage in space and they have no idea where to start from. So Space for Tomorrow became a resource center for knowledge and for understanding in space matters and that kind of thing, both indigenously and internationally. So we'd get international knowledge and then indigenous knowledge to put everything together so that there is an endless resource for those who may need it in terms of space matters. So that's how I transitioned from dancer to space
Dan-
lawyer, space policy
yeah,
analyst.
dancer
Yes.
to lawyer to space. You said something very interesting that I'd like to hear a little more about. You said you fell in love with what space really is. What
Ye-
is space then in your mind?
Well, there could both they're both there's both a scientific and a non-scientific definition of space. If I were to just speak scientifically, well, that is the international consensus is around the common line. So anything above about 100 kilometers above sea level, that's space. That's the common line. But when I think about space non-scientifically, I would say that space for me is humanity's next home, where humans have to look for their next sustenance uh, above the planet. When you get out of the planet and you get into the resources that vast expanse affords humanity and affords sentient beings, that is space. So for me, it will not even be just about the common line per se. It will be everything that holds man's future outside of this planet. So that's what I would think of space as.
So I hear a very strong common theme from you about the future of humanity, the future of individuals, giving everyone the opportunity to excel. Is that fair?
Yes, sure. I'm very keen on there not being one of my taglines is when I'm up in the sky, I see no borders. A few times I've been on a plane and I looked from, when you look outside the window and you notice that from up there you see really nothing. You see lands, you see seas, you see clouds. You really do not see the different things that humans have, the walls that humans have created around themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see color, you do not see gender, you do not see any of that. All you see is God's good earth. And for me, because when I'm up in the sky, I see no borders, I hope that humanity, when it looks into the skies, it sees no borders. That when we go into space, we go with no borders. Because when we are a divided species, when we're a species that is constantly fighting among each other, we are going to likely export those fights into space. We are going to have the real life Star Wars. And I think that is the stupid games where you win stupid prizes and no one is going to win uh, from such an effort. So I'm very enthusiastic about the peaceful uses of outer space and for outer space to be for the benefit of all mankind, regardless of creed or color or gender, for space to be for everyone. And that's something that I'm really passionate about.
And so when you talk about that, and you touched on it before, I mean, Uganda is not known for its space program. And
Yes,
obviously, as you spoke, this was, partly to educate the future. It actually only launched recently its first satellite, and you wrote an op-ed about that. Can you tell us about what won the op-ed, but what that first satellite meant?
sure. So about the Uganda satellite, it was more because one, Uganda uh, last year in November um, launched its first satellite, the PALSat 1, Pal Africa Sat 1. And the Pal Africa Sat 1, the interesting thing is I had a bit of foreknowledge about that satellite. I had participated in some of the works that led to that satellite being, getting to where it did. And one of my main concerns was that um, very many states that have launched satellites before or have engaged in space endeavors have often met themselves with the space curse, or you may call a space curse, getting into space and then it has no benefit for the common man. And I did not want Uganda to reach or to be at that level. So while the satellite was a good idea for the country, um, it could very easily turn into a bad idea if it's mismanaged and mishandled.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote that op-ed to basically show how can Uganda benefit from a satellite? How can Uganda succeed where many have failed? You know, um, so at the end of the day, the satellite is not a white elephant for the state and for the common taxpayer who has to keep funding a space program that is not profitable. So
Mm-hmm.
where for example, programs like NASA have been running for more than 60 years and use over $600 billion, younger programs can learn from the mistakes that the older ones have done so that they can
Mm-hmm.
avoid those mistakes and then be able to grow their own space programs in a manner that is sustainable but also profitable to not just the state but also the common man. So that was the idea of writing that op-ed, and I hope that the powers that be and policymakers would be able to look at that and try to follow some of the recommendations I made therein.
And what are some of the things that could benefit the Ugandan people that you see, coming out of the satellite and its uses?
Yeah, sure. So, in my opinion, the most immediate benefit for the local Ugandan person from space stems from the economy of the country. Over 80% of all Ugandans are employed within the agricultural sector. Now, that already illustrates the backbone of the economy is agriculture. And because it is agriculture, space should be able to benefit the agriculturalist. Now, in the past, we have had a bit of issues with weather and disaster. So, for example, some of the areas in the country that are mountainous have faced landslides almost every single year. Will have landslides, sweeping out people's homes and families and farms and all that, and then it leads to food insecurity in that area. And then in some other areas like the northeastern part of the country, there's a lot of drought. So when it comes to use of space applications, or what we call space applications, we are able to use space applications to help those farmers to better plan for their planting and harvesting seasons, so that they can get the maximum benefit or profit out of their land. But not only that, I'm also looking at using space to manage the environment in Uganda, because the environment is directly related to the farming activities. If you have poor climate in the country, then the farmers are not going to benefit at all. And we are seeing a lot of, for example, deforestation that is almost eroding a huge part of the country's forest cover.
Mhm.
Space applications can be used to monitor deforestation, to manage deforestation, and even reforestation efforts, and all these other different things, even managing, for example, monitoring water levels and water quality. All these are things that can be managed using space applications, because Uganda, even though it has, some areas are really dry, but it does, for example, it's most famous for being the source of the River Nile, the longest river in the world. And it also shares the largest part of, for example, Lake Victoria, which is the second largest freshwater lake in the world. And but all these resources would not benefit the local person if the vast amount of resources in them remains untapped. And I'm a firm believer that space applications can help or can aid in the tapping into of those resources and maximizing the benefit that can be gotten out of those resources for the benefit of the local Ugandan.
Okay, no, very well put. And we've heard that on the show before, not specific to Uganda, but the notion that the best way to see the world or understand it is through space, and more specifically to understand climate change, and the impact of our climate on us as individuals is from space. So I think that's really important, exactly how you're describing it. And I just, one other thing, I mean, it's so in line with space, but you had so many interesting things, on in your background. You also talked to Moon Village. What is Moon Village?
Right. So the Moon Village Association is an international organization that is aiming at saying that the resources that the moon affords mankind are properly utilized, and that mankind's next visit and perhaps permanent stay on the moon is profitable and that it is sustainable. So the Moon Village Association is mostly concerned with the proper utilization of the resources that the moon affords mankind in a way that is sustainable and is profitable for all that are involved. So that's what the Moon Village Association basically is. Because the moon, being our nearest neighbor, does afford us quite a lot of opportunities, but it can also be a source of conflict. It can also be a source of of disturbance, even on worldly peace and worldly stability.
Mhm.
So I am representing the Moon Village Association in Uganda, and our main goal is basically to say that we raise awareness about the moon, but also to drive efforts that would lead to the sustainable utilization of the moon's resources.
Okay, well,
Yes.
David Kasibante, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's amazing how quickly the time goes and speaking with people on Say Hi to the Future. I'm going from dance minister and poet, which is really overwhelmingly about helping people who need it most, and turning them into pillars um, your country, your society, to your incredible interest in space as a space as a lawyer, and as a lawyer involved in space law. So thank you so much. And just one last question for you. What do you see the future of Africa's role in space, or Uganda's role in space, if you will?
Well, for Africa, I would say that Africa has one of the fastest growing space sectors currently. I am The way that I view Africa becoming, what I view Africa becoming, is that it's going to be a hub for the development of space resources or things that are going to be used in space. Here I'm talking about satellite subsystems, subsystems for different space objects that will be used. But I'm also seeing Africa being um, a launching center for different, launching capabilities and remote sensing capabilities. This is because Africa and Uganda uh, are located, for example, Uganda is located on the equator, which gives it an advantage. It gives it a launching advantage for various launches. So, and Africa, many countries in Africa are crossed by the equator and are near the tropics, the tropical whatever sort of gives Africa that kind of leverage for launch capabilities. And then the large mineral resource base for that Africa has can afford it the raw materials that will be used for subsystem development for different space objects and space resources. So I believe that what I'm seeing Africa like is being the hub for those two particular places. So satellite and space resource subsystem development, and then launching capabilities. Maybe another thing is I'm also seeing Africa becoming um, a diplomatic center, for a resolution of disputes, of space disputes, because Africa has been conspicuously um, missing from most of the disputes that arise out of space and even other geopolitical issues. And because of that, it leaves Africa as a very largely neutral place where some of these disputes can be resolved. So I'm also seeing a bit of that in Africa's future. But again, it would need for a lot of efforts to be put together to have a realization of some of those aspects. Other than that, there may be a bit of if politics overtakes the interests of mankind, then of course we may see Africa proliferate like the other states around the world. But other than that, I'm seeing a pretty big and bright future for Africa.
Well, David Kasibante, Space for Tomorrow, thank you so much for your time and sharing with us today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this discussion.